friends. We are here today in 1 Corinthians chapter 4. So this chapter is a lot about judging each other as Christians. So when it comes to Christianity, it's kind of like it's not like other things. You know, I was talking to my son the other day, and he told me that he wants to have a trophy. He's 5, and he's not in any sports, and he basically has no way to earn a trophy, but I very much remember that when I was a young kid. I very much remember wanting to have a trophy. It was almost like I saw other people, and on their dresser was this statue to their greatness. You know, just like a physical sign that they were awesome at something, so that all the people around them can know, like, this person has worth. But when it comes to our actual worth, where does that come from? And basically, how do we acknowledge that? And when it comes to criticizing other Christians or criticizing a pastor, where does that come from? So Paul is writing this chapter, and he's still talking about divisions in the church, you know, because some people liked Paul, and some people liked Apollos, and some people liked Peter. But in these divisions, people were criticizing Paul for I don't know what. We don't know why, but for whatever reasons, there were divisions in the church for this. And Paul is addressing how this is not a good way to look at something, because being a good Christian, or even being a good minister of the gospel, is not like the type of thing that you would give someone a trophy for. You know, it's not, because it's not about you. So he starts off the chapter and he says, when you look at us, you shouldn't look at us as, you know, stars. He says, we are first and foremost servants. Now, pretty much every translation you'll read will say servants, but in the original language, it was slaves. So he's like, you should look at us not as rock stars. Of course, I didn't use that word either, but you shouldn't look at us as rock stars, but you should look at us as slaves and stewards, and, you know, stewards of the mysteries of God. So like a slave a long time ago, you know, you could be like an accountant slave, or, you know, a lot of times the slaves would be given, you know, money and, you know, capital, so that they can make investments and everything. And he's like, that's what we are. And so as he's going through this chapter, he says what makes us good or makes us bad as Christians is our faithfulness to the master, not how awesome we are at speaking, or how giving we are, or how, you know, all of these things just go to puff you up. So that's what this chapter is about. So he goes on to talk about how these people are criticizing, you know, the early church leaders, and he's like, but we have become the scum of the earth. You know, we are talked about by the church in all these negative ways, like, oh, they're not doing this right, they're not doing that right. And I feel like that's common in our day today too. We'll look at our pastors and we will hold them to a much higher standard. But they're just fellow servants with you. They're just normal people. But with that, he's saying, you know, when we go out in the public, people try to kill us, and, you know, they were persecuted at every turn. And he said, but not you guys. He says, we're the scum of the earth, but you guys are great, you know. You guys are kings, but we're these poor peasants. And I think it's interesting because he's drawing on this idea that they're being judged by these people, and especially the church in Corinth was a complete mess. So it's like, I might judge, and I have, and this is horrible. I will tell you a very small story. I tried to get a job at a church, and so I went there, and I was looking at the pastor's tie, and I was like, that tie is going to get in the way of the gospel. It was just such a bad looking tie. So I can criticize this pastor, who is a great pastor, a very, very good pastor, and of a very good church, and I'm criticizing for what he looks like, for his tie, for how he speaks, what he wears. This is ridiculous. But I do it. I can say, I remember having a friend, and I played this sermon, and the guy was like, I don't like how that pastor breathes. It's like in between every sentence is this way he goes, and he's like, I just can't listen to him. But the people that are criticizing these people, the people that are criticizing the church leaders at the time, are people that are, having affairs with their own not mother-in-laws, but their own stepmothers. They're people that are getting drunk off the communion wine. So he's saying, you guys are kings, but we are the scum of the earth. It's interesting. There's something that he says in this chapter. He says, what have you received, or what do you have that you haven't received? I think that's such an interesting concept, because it's like, you could say that about anything. Anything that you have received, whether it be material or some sort of like gift or ability, that has very little to do with you. You have been given certain gifts by God, and other people have been given other gifts. So you shouldn't criticize, other people, pastors included, or church workers, or anybody really. You shouldn't criticize other Christians for, anything, whether it be material things or certain giftings. We should look at each other, and we should only hold each other accountable for how faithful they are to God, and how faithful they are to the mysteries of God, like he said. Something else that Paul says, and that is that he's talking about judging, and he says, I don't even judge myself. And I don't think he's talking about he's like, I'm blameless. And in fact, he even says in the next sentence, he says, this doesn't mean that I'm blameless. He's just saying that when you're pronouncing judgment on other people, it has nothing to do with you. He said, I don't judge myself, because how do I have the authority to say what is good and what is bad? He said that all comes from God. God knows how faithful I am to him. God knows if I am doing what he is asking me to do. So you don't know what God's asking other people to do. You should be very forgiving and loving for how different people are. That is 1 Corinthians chapter 4. All right, have a great day. Bye.